By the time she made it to Liston, the attack was well underway. Several houses were on fire, and she could see the few guards fighting desperately against the dozens of bandits. Her presence did not go unnoticed, as arrows began firing from the walls. She figured some bandits must have taken hold up there to pick off any fleeing civilians, but an approaching giantess may not have been in their plans. Nevertheless, they fired a few arrows at her feet, which of course did nothing to stop her, as she raised her foot over the wall and crossed over with ease, the bottom of her dress scraping the roof and sending a gust of wind past the bandits, knocking them off their feet. "Let me down now! I must protect the king!" Claymore shouted. She obeyed and bent over to deposit him on the ground. Alban hopped off too, but he in turn turned around and placed a hand on her thumb before running off.
"I'm going to help. Be safe, all right?"
"I'll be safe. I promise. I trust you can take care of the fire, no problem." Valerie rose to her full height and stepped back outside the city. The bandits had just stood back up when the dress blew past them again, knocking them over once more. Once outside, she scanned the horizon and spotted a small lake not far away. She looked around, hoping to find anything to put the water out, but there was nothing of use. Nothing but her mouth.
"Well, Belina did this once before, so I suppose it will work again."
Determined, she set off at a jog for the lake, her mind racing with fear for her husband as she rushed off into battle. Little to her knowledge, just as she'd been exiting the city again, Kassel had cut his way out of her pocket and jumped out to pursue the King of Vandan. Claymore stabbed a bandit who was chasing after a woman and her children, and the man fell as he removed his sword, moving quickly on to help anyone else he could on his way to the king's hall. Alban ran behind him, covering his back. Smoke covered the streets and screaming could be heard in multiple directions. "There's so many people. Why focus on the king?" Alban asked. "He's their target. Whoever's leading this charge will be there since Kassel's with your wife. They're a cowardly lot. If we take out their leader, they'll disperse. Keep pressing on." Alban nodded as the two men traversed the ruined streets until they came into the courtyard outside the hall. A few guards remaining there locking swords with some bandits. But Alban and Claymore provided the necessary aid as they took them by surprise, disposing of them quickly. "Captain Claymore! A sight for sore eyes. Is the giantess here too?" "Yes, she'll put out this fire. We're here to protect our king." "He's inside, barricaded in the cellar." "Good, keep it that way. Who's leading them?" "Seems to be Kassel." "Of course, but who is his second in command?" "No one we've seen. They're all highly uncoordinated, but they outnumber us greatly." "We'll see about that, Alban," Claymore said as he turned to the captain. "Secure the courtyard. I'll rally any men here to defend this entrance. Hopefully your wife will make quick work of the rest of the bandits. With luck, we'll see the end of this." Alban did as he was told, and he circled the courtyard, taking a few bandits by surprise and rallying some soldiers to join the rest of the group. He had nearly completed a full rotation of the building when he first heard and saw an army of bandits, led by none other than Kassel himself, charge the defenses and burst into the hall. Before he could reach the group in time, Kassel had emerged again with the king's son, Luke, held by the collar of his shirt. The bandit lord smiled a devilish grin at the King of Vandan, as a few other bandits exited with Claymore and King Ferran, both tied up. "O great kings of old, your time has now come to an end. Witness the victory of the true emperor of these lands."
"Father!"
Kassel slapped Luke on the side of his head to quiet him. "Well, well, well, King Alban. Without your beast protecting you, you're not much of a threat." Haughty words coming from a man holding a child hostage. "Strength is not always who is the better fighter, Alban. You should know that by now. Strength comes from the mind and the body working together. something you clearly lack. You want to prove it? Then fight me. Kassel laughed. Do you hear that, men? The dejected prince of Elgon, the man who whores after giants, the man who had to be rescued from Bargar himself, wishes to fight me. Kassel threw Luke aside and pointed his sword towards Alban. So be it. Valerie returned minutes later, her mouth full of water as she stepped over the wall and released dozens of gallons onto the burning city. The effect was immediate, and several houses were doused. She grinned, but before she had returned to collect more water, she heard shouting coming from the courtyard outside the hall. She looked to see what was happening, and gasped when she realized Kassel was there. She felt inside her pocket, and put a finger through the hole he must have cut. Alban. The giantess moved with haste, not taking as much care with her walk through the city streets. Just as she was coming upon them, she felt something sting her ankles and wrap around them.
Ow!
She shrieked in pain and tripped as whatever it was had tied her up. Her body fell face forward onto the street, and the ground shook upon the impact. She felt her head, some blood trickling from it, and she looked down at her legs. A chain had been wrapped around her, and on the chain were several large spikes, which had teared into her skin. She reached for the chain and tugged, but this only caused more pain, and she smacked the ground with her fist.
Ow!
She looked past her ankles to see what had done this, and her eyes fell upon some war machine, like a giant slingshot, and it was loading up another projectile. Alban drew his sword and began to circle Kassel, and Kassel did the same. The two sized each other up before they struck. Alban took a defensive to get a bearing on how Kassel fought. He went for a quick and fatal blow to the stomach, which Alban knocked away. Then he took a swipe at his neck, another easy parry for Alban. He returned with a counter which capitalized on the lower defenses Kassel had due to his sloppy opening, but it seemed Kassel had anticipated this. Alban tried to jab for his side, but the bandit lord sidestepped him and cut him on his forearm. Ah! The swing stung, but he could still fight. He just couldn't allow another injury, or he'd be in trouble. It was then that he heard Valerie approach and fall, which stole his attention, something Kassel used to his advantage. You fool! Kassel ferociously attacked, and it took all that Alban had to block his jabs and swipes while also trying to see what happened with Valerie. He rolled away from one attack and found his footing on a ledge above Kassel. The height gave him an advantage, and he locked swords from his position. Give up now, and I may spare you, Alban. You may serve me personally under my empire. I'd rather die. So be it. Kassel swung for his legs, but Alban jumped, then kicked at the bandit, something he had not expected. The kick landed and he fell over, clutching his chin. Alban smiled as he jumped off the ledge and held his sword at the back of his neck. Give up now, Kassel, and I may spare you. You can rot in a prison cell rather than die by my blade. Kassel merely laughed as he rolled away from the sword, drew a knife, and stabbed Alban in the calf. Ah! The blow crippled him as he fell to his knees, and Kassel ripped the sword from his grasp. You fought well, King Alban, but now you will be the first of many dead rulers by this blade. Valerie groaned as the pain was getting to her, but she knew she'd have to think fast to avoid another blow from this machine. Thinking quickly, she grabbed a cart that was near her and threw it just as another chain was fired. The cart was obliterated, and the chain fell on a house nearby. Valerie smiled at the small victory and tugged at the chains again. Gritting her teeth, she ripped the spikes out and tore the chains from her legs, the links snapping as she put all her strength into it. The machine was just about to fire another shot when she and the bandits controlling the weapon heard a screech from the sky. Before they knew it, the owl she'd seen in the woods descended upon the machine and grabbed it with its talons. The weapon crumbled in its grip and flew past Valerie into the courtyard. She stood with a bit of difficulty and then limped towards the fight near the hall. Alban closed his eyes, ready to accept Kassel's final blow. This was it for him. He had seen Valerie just before and had advised her to be safe. What poor words to leave her on. He should have stayed with her. He should have been by her side. Just as these thoughts crossed his mind, he opened his eyes when he heard a screech, then watched as Kassel was gripped by sharp talons and carried off by the white owl that he had seen in the forest. His mouth agape, he watched the bird fly off, Kassel screaming the entire time. In the chaos, Alban's sword had been dropped, and he grabbed it as he stood, using it to steady him. The bandits behind him dropped their swords, and he smiled triumphantly before he felt someone grip him gently and lift him into the sky. He was then pressed against giant lips, the dirt on his face washing away onto Valerie. He returned the kiss before she placed him in her hand. "Well, you look worse for wear," he said, noticing her bruised ankles.
"So do you?"
she said, eyeing his wounds. "I guess we both need to watch each other's backs."
"Always,"
she said, and she pulled him close to her cheek to let him hug her as best as he could. On the ground, King Ferran and Claymore had freed themselves since the bandits had fled at the sight of Valerie. Ferran rushed over to Luke and picked him up, holding him tightly. "Oh, I'm so sorry, son. I'm so glad you're safe."
She saved us, Father. Valerie!
"Yes. Indeed she did. She's our hero." Ferran looked at Claymore and he nodded. "It does seem like she is," he said. Alban smiled down at the captain. Then he looked back at his wife. "I say we clean this place up a bit."
"I agree,"
she replied. Evening arrived once the town had been repaired. There was still much work to be done, but the fires had been put out, the dead buried, and a feast prepared to celebrate the victory at Liston. Tables had been set outside the walls, and everyone in the town gathered together to sing, dance, and drink together. Alban sat with the king and captain, while Valerie played with the children, all of whom had been fascinated after seeing her send the bandits fleeing. Luke was especially enamored by her as he climbed along her waist, trying to reach her head. She noticed his efforts and giggled, an action which made him lose his grip, but she caught him before he fell too far. She raised him to her face and smiled at him.
"Hello again, Luke."
Queen Valerie, you're the best giantess ever. Will you protect us forever?
"I'm afraid, dear. King Alban and I must return to our quest."
Oh, take me with you then. Father will allow me since he knows you can protect me.
"But that isn't true, Luke. You could get lost or hurt, and you are a very young man. Enjoy your youth. Don't chase after every danger."
But my father always chases danger.
"Your father isn't 10 years old."
she said, laughing.
But I'm big and strong,
He said, punching at the air.
"I'm sure you are, Luke."
She said with a grin. Meanwhile, Alban was sharing a drink with Claymore and Ferran as they discussed Alban's quest. "You should have me along. I've scouted the giant's house out there before," Claymore said. "I can't promise Valerie would agree." "Do you agree?" Alban let his head fall as he thought. "I'm not sure. If this giant is dangerous, is it right to risk anyone else going along? 2 men are better than 1. Well, I have Valerie." Well, obviously, even with her, you two seem to find a lot of trouble. What harm is there of the two of us going? Alban shook his head. I'm just not sure, Claymore. Trust me, you'll need some help.
Help with what?
Valerie had returned Luke to Ferran, setting her hand down just as she entered the conversation. The towering presence made Claymore quiet as he looked up into her eyes. Her face filled the sky above him, and her eyes were larger than his head, peering down to him. For this quest, m'lady.
You want to join us? I thought you weren't very fond of me.
Well, things change, I suppose. Seeing your work has reconsider my opinions. Valerie giggled as she extended a finger towards him. He jumped a bit, then set his hand on her fingertip and shook. So, that's a yes?
I don't see why not. Alban doesn't need a lot of people to care for him.
Alban rolled his eyes and smacked the back of her hand playfully.
It's settled then. We can send you with horses and supplies for the journey. Only a day north from here, Ferran said. But first, we have something for you, Queen Valerie.
Ferran gestured to a man with a lute, who began to sing at his cue. Oh, the city was burned, the people afraid, the bandits had indeed returned. A cry for help, for a hero to come, the night seemed utterly lost. Then on the horizon, a joy for sure, our wonderful savior, Queen Valerie. With her mighty stride and her unbeatable strength, she vanquished the bandits with ease. Now songs will be sung, the stories will be told, of the great and mighty Queen Valerie. Many cheers rose when the song was over, and Valerie clapped for the performance. More songs rose up during the night, and more dancing followed before the town settled down for the night, leaving Valerie and Alban alone again. The owl again? Alban said after watching the stars for a moment.
Yes, it seems we owe much to him now.
Why did he rescue us?
I'm not sure. I feel like we will be seeing him again, though.
Alban wanted to say more, but his bandaged wounds and the events of the day wore him out, and he fell asleep, listening to Valerie's steady and quiet breathing.